be learned about this strange, strange, strange world.
The journey to the edge of space was not far enough, not far enough, not far enough.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Ethereal Explorer. I'm your host, Amy, and I will also be your guide today on our journey into the very interesting subject of astrology and human design and how they relate. Our guest today is Christos of Common Empowerment, and he is a person who understands fully how to bridge both systems. He can do both, and so he's going to be illuminating a lot of things for us today. And so just to preface this, there has been we all know about astrology. It's really baked pretty deeply into our culture and pretty worldwide. So we're very familiar with astrology. And in recent years, and I feel like especially even this year, another system called Human Design has really been appearing a lot. And I've paid some attention to it, and it really resonates with me. And as I'm paying attention to both, however, both astrology and human design, I'm getting different messages sort of from each, and they both kind of resonate at different levels. And I'm at a point where I have a lot of questions. And so, I'm going to do a series here, and this is episode 1. And today I really want to talk about, is this a Pepsi versus Coke situation? Do we pick one or the other? Or is there a lot of crossover? Are there bridges to build? Can we leverage both of these systems in our daily lives? So, Christos, hello and welcome. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
G'day, Amy. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so my name's Christos. I'm an empowerment coach. I help people become empowered, live the best lives they can be, power through shock, the power of shock to overcome barriers in their life and basically take responsibility for consciousness. And yeah, so I've basically been a tradesman here in Australia for most of my adult life. I've been painting houses, and yeah, one day I absolutely got sick of it and realized that it was destroying my health, my body, my mind. And I've really been interested in spirituality and reality and the way it works and consciousness. And I thought, you know what? I've had such a life, so many experiences. I love learning about this stuff. I'm going to dedicate myself to helping people. So I started reading esoteric books. I started looking at all sorts of systems. I started with theology. I actually got a scholarship to study theology at the University of Sydney, and realized that wasn't for me after a while, after learning ancient Greek and learning ancient systems and how they work. And that led me to astrology, dove into that for a while and realized that there were other systems. And then I realized about human design. And I was like, wow, this is cool. This is another system. And then I got into gene keys. And basically, over about a 7-year cycle, I fed my soul with all this information. And I integrated it all and realized that people were coming to me for advice and help and, just a loving ear and eye. And yeah, I found people really looking for my guidance and thought, wow, yeah, what am I? I guess I'm an empowerment coach. Here I am. So I've been integrating these systems, using them in my personal life, and kind of guiding other people to both use these systems and also transcend them so that they can put themselves front and center in their life.
I love that, and that's a subject I think over the series I'd love to always tie in is using the systems, but eventually transcending them. So yes, using them as tools. That's a beautiful story, and I'm so happy to have the opportunity to ask you these questions. So I think the first question that comes before all questions in my mind is, why are we even doing this? Why are we coming up with systems and reflecting all the time and wanting to look to something else to have insight in our own lives, it can be sometimes obsessive, or sometimes, like I said, I'm following all these astrologers and all these human design people and getting almost like all this information about myself, and like we almost eat it up. And where does that desire to have a system to look to even really originate?
Good question. Well, I think it's honestly a part of human nature. I think for as long as humankind has existed, we've looked up at the stars and wondered, where am I in all this? What's my place in the universe? Who am I? Where am I? What environment and situation am I in? How do I make sense of who I am? We humans, we have a very developed prefrontal cortex. We're very resilient. As opposed to most other animals, it gives us the ability to kind of be self-reflective, to see ourselves in a mirror and go, oh, that's not another person, that's me. And I guess, the sky has always been the world's biggest mirror.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Looked up and gone, I don't think, I think as we humans evolved, as we became more conscious, I think we started seeing, we never saw ourselves as separate to begin with. There was no concept of separation. We were primitive, we were cavemen and women, So we were all about survival. We were all about instinct in the moment. We're all about, let's just get this done. Let's hunt this animal. Let's eat this food. Let's procreate. Let's do all these desires. And our genes are kind of front and center here. And I think, we at a certain point when we had all our material comforts, when we started having villages and tribes and having a social environment, we moved out of caves and things like that. We had a tribe. We felt safe. We were a little more protected. We had food stored up. We had farming, so we were able to grow stuff. We didn't have to worry so much about survival. And I think that freed us to look at more spiritual pursuits. We started having shamans. We started having people saying, who am I? How do we explore this? How can I be better? Things that animals never asked or could ask in our existence.
True. Yeah, you touched on some things that crossed my mind as well, and almost that primal need for survival, I think, is mirrored this in our day now, as we have this like innate desire to know what the future is. And I think it's a safety thing. Like we want to know if we're going to be secure. But I think that's also why we look to these systems, because they have a bit of a predictive mechanism. And that kind of makes us feel safer, in a way.
Yeah.
And I like what you said about mirrors, because I think when we're really struggling in our path, or we've lost our way, and we have a hard time seeing ourselves or what is happening from like a greater perspective. So having these systems as mirrors for us is also really effective. I really like that.
That's an interesting point you bring up, because I didn't mention this before. I'd love to talk a bit about the neuroscience of us, because I didn't mention that I studied psychotherapy, counseling as well. So I dove into neuroscience for a while.
I love that.
I learned, one of the biggest things I learned was that humans are meaning-making machines. We don't really feel safe unless we are able to make meaning of our experience. We don't feel safe unless we're able to, what we do has some kind of meaning for us and tells us something about ourselves. So we are literally hardwired to find meaning in things. And if that's, it's interesting how we're hardwired to find meaning, but not necessarily truth. We'll be happy to adopt that just for that sense of security, even if it's not the truth.
That reminds me, there's been so many songs written that's just lie to me, but please don't leave, or lie to me, but just let me be blind to it. Like, it's like we sing about that too. Like, it's so interesting. All right, Christos coming in with the neuroscience. I love that. Okay. I should have brought my glasses so we could, get my glasses on.
A little bit.
Oh, okay, cool. So I feel like we've got the foundation of why. So maybe a little bit more about was sort of it's a newer system kind of divine download, and it's catching on. It's starting to build up to this critical mass. And then we have astrology that's kind of baked into culture. And now human design is getting more popular, but it's also, I know you say that astrology is part of it,
Mm.
and there's other system. It's sort of like a braiding of systems, is it not?
Yeah, so it's kind of interwoven of a lot of different disciplines and systems. So it's built on astrology, numerology. Um, there's a lot here, so bear with me. The I Ching, Taoism, quantum mechanics, quantum science, uh, and a bunch of other stuff I can't remember right now, but a lot of things kind of coming together. The Kabbalah. So it's kind of, you can look at it as kind of an integration of all the existing systems at the time, and it uses these to create something that I love, which is a really beautiful holistic perspective of the human person from so many different angles. So it talks about, for example, it would talk about everything astrology talks about, but with different language. So
Mm-hmm.
about, for example, your inner personality, but it would refer to it in terms of energy and quantum mechanics, and it would say that you're subject to, the neutrino stream and things like that.
So, do you ever find that there are these sets of information? You bring up your astrology chart, you bring up your human design chart. Are they
Mm.
always in harmony because astrology is incorporated, or are we sometimes seeing like your astrology chart would indicate you would be very introverted, but then your human design chart would say you're very extroverted? Like, is it ever kind of at odds?
Yeah, interesting question. I would say yes, on a certain level. So there is the system itself, and then there's our interpretation of the system and how it kind of affects us. And so when you're talking about the very basic level of the mechanical system, there's complete overlap. So, for example, if the sun is in the 10th house in Libra, then that's, you can look up. There's actually programs you can download and websites and go to that show you that on that day what the human design is built around that. So it will show you that the sun is in the 10th house in Libra, but then it will also show you the other things. It's in gate 57.3. The neutrino stream is doing this. It's in this, so it's kind of all, it's in a gate, which is to do with the I Ching. It's in this hexagram on this particular day, and this hexagram is this. So it's like a smorgasbord of all these different things you can choose to look at separately or integrate to get a whole picture of what's going on. I've never found a time that it's at odds, because it's built on the same bricks and mortar thing. It's built on the same foundation. So the astrology is the same for human design and gene keys, but it's just a slightly different. It's like adding more to it from a different perspective. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And then I guess brings up another question, which is then if we have human design, do we even need astrology anymore?
Mm. Well, here's the thing. I was never hugely into astrology until I stumbled upon human design. Human design is what really got me interested in astrology, because all of a sudden I could see astrology from this different perspective that made a little more sense and it clarified things for me more. It was the same astrology that I wasn't interested in much in the past, but this new slant let me really have a renewed interest in astrology, because I was able to see it in a different way from a different perspective. It kind of made sense to me and was able to integrate it more. So, excuse me. So, I was talking earlier about how we have a foundation layer and how then we have like the upper layers of the system. So, the foundation layer is human design, uh, astrology, I Ching, all these systems, quantum mechanics, and you can look at all these separately. But then the more complex layers, the higher layers are, how does this apply to me? What am I feeling today? And how can I see this reflected in my, what's called my body graph, human design body graph for the day? And so you can get software which will show you all the different things. And you can choose some, or you can look at it all. You can say, okay, the sun is transiting Libra in the 10th house, and it's in gate 57. Gate 57 is the gate of intuitive awareness, and I feel really heightened today. So that explains that. But I'm also, using that to be really social and meet a lot of new people, which is what Libra in the 10th house represents: reputation, social groups, and balance.
I think
So,
what you're doing right now is what I feel like we're moving towards, which is kind of bridging things. And it's so cool to get a reading from someone like you who can say those things, can see them both, and you fill in a lot of gaps when you're able to read both of these charts. And I am so overwhelmed that like I was just like, there's no way I'll ever learn both of these. But that's why I'm very thankful for people like Christos, because Christos, your understanding of how they all braid together is so great. And
wow,
I'm so
thank you. Thank you.
yeah. You're
I
welcome.
I really do think this is where we as a species is kind of the next level of seeing ourselves. When we pay coaches for a lot of things spiritually, but I think that humanity is at the point where they really want to see themselves reflected in more than one system, because they're realizing how complex they are.
Yeah.
My life's made me realize how complex we are as human beings, and that one system only really gives one part of the picture and can be limited. I think it's important these days to have an understanding of an integrated, holistic view of a person, and be able to see from all different angles, because we're different people every day and we see things differently depending on how we feel.
That is so true. That's why I've been following more moon stuff, because like every day, I don't know. Oh, that'll be another podcast too. But I feel like when I ask, I'm going to ask a lot of people, if human design is so comprehensive with the systems, does that sort of antiquate astrology? I'm just gonna ask it because I know I'm gonna get different answers from everybody. Um,
Mm,
Something I was thinking about astrology that brings up a question is astrology, I believe, has an ability to almost not predict, but to describe or map out a collective experience as well. Like the age of Aquarius is coming, and it can kind of do a pretty large scale energetic prediction. In human design, is it always very individualized, like just from
mm,
person to person, or is there any way of getting like a collective
mm.
uh, insight? I
Yeah,
guess.
a great question. I would say both are true, because human design is built on astrology. So everything astrology has, human design already has. But the differences between the two, this is where you start to see the major differences, is that the crux of human design is what Ra called differentiation of the human person, versus what he called homogenization, conditioning, fitting in, becoming this homogenized, blended up kind of one size fits all thing in a society that just wants you to fit in and be a certain way and not really be yourself. So
Mhm.
differentiation in human design is the concept of being yourself. And before human design, when people said be yourself, unless you really understood astrology, it was very difficult to know what that meant, because how do you know who you is? You changes all the time. But with your human design body graph, there's a very clear representation, symbolic representation of who you are right in front of you. The power of human design is that it encourages you to be yourself, and then it shows you a map to yourself, to how to be yourself.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I like that idea of a map.
Mm,
I think that really resonates. I think a lot of people could wrap their head around that.
yeah.
Um,
There
yeah.
are concepts such as your incarnation cross as well, which shows you your path in life and shows you what that would look like. There are, like, I think 170,000 combinations or something, so
Wow.
it's pretty unique. And so you can look up what your life will look like. You can look up how you should be acting, how being around different people affects you and takes
Hmm.
you, conditions you from your path or puts you more firmly on your path. and so on. So that's what astrology really can't do unless you understand kind of the very ins and outs, the niche bits of astrology, and even then they're very limited. So I would say that, yeah, human design kind of fills those gaps and allows you to take it further. Now, I don't think that astrology can't do that. I just think that the level of knowledge of astrology it takes to be able to live that way is huge and very hard to find information on. So versus human design where you can just plug in your body graph and there's a lot of information on what that means and how you act, and you can kind of fill in the blanks, and also there's room for your own interpretation as well.
Yes. So, in your work as an empowerment coach, do you leverage these tools with everyone that you work with?
Interesting. So the reason I am so integrated in what I do is because I see people as integrated, complex human beings. They're very different, and some human design appeals to me because I'm very into the art of differentiation. I'm very into saying, find what you are, experiment, and live that as best as you can, and ignore what society tells you to be, because you won't be happy until you do that, right? But along with a lot of people say that, but they also don't offer solutions. They also don't say, how do you do that, right? How does that look when I'm doing that? What situations would be helpful to be that in? So what I do is I use, and this is something to do with my own human design makeup, where I have something called external visions, and I can see a lot of things from the outside. Most people can't see and bring them together. So I like to see what system a person would resonate with in that particular moment, depending on what they're asking me and what they want to get out of the situation. If they want to know themselves better, if they want a particular relationship issue, I'll get information, intuitive information, on which system fits best, or maybe many systems fit. And I have software that allows me to look at all of that at once, or go to whichever I need to go to explain it to them. And then I'll walk them through both why things are like that, what the system says that they can do, but also I'll ask them how they feel about things using their intuition and how they can be more in contact with their inner empowerment.
I think I love that, and I think that's a good place to kind of wrap up this whole this initial conversation. Is really like we'll go into the very specifics of types and gates and houses and degrees and things like that in the episodes to come, because it's interesting and we want to know and we have millions of questions. But really it just comes down to always working at feeling your intuition more. And because for a long time I'm a Libra supposedly, but I just didn't resonate with that. And I used to always read my Chinese astrology. I'm an ox, apparently I'm a wood ox, and I can't tell you what that is anymore, but I used to read it and be like, yes, I feel like this. And so it doesn't matter what system it is, kind of feel your way through it and gravitate to the ones that, because you will, with your intuition, gravitate towards the ones that have those keys for you, or have the wisdom that you need in those times, or whatever. So
very true.
Yeah, I think
Tend to forget that we're at the center of every system, and the only reason it exists is to point back to us.
Amen. Oh, so well said, Christos. Yes. Way to bring it home. This has been such a great conversation. Very illuminating. I'm so grateful to have had you here. And you're one thing I love, I have to say, is that I'm in Vancouver, Canada. Christos is in Australia. And we're actually on different days right now. I'm on a Saturday, he's on a Sunday, because of the way time works. And I just feel like I'm talking to Christos from the future. Thank you so much, wise future man, for helping us today.
You're so welcome. It's really nice here in the future, so join me when you can.
Yes, we plan to. We will be there eventually.
Whether you want to or not.
All right, see you next time on the Ethereal Explorer.
Great to see you.